crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really interesting topic of conversation, talking about bicycle and bicycle accidents and everything you need to know. So this is the show. If you or you have a friend who loves riding their bike, want to know about the rules of the road and their rights, this is the show that will answer those questions. So you might just want to get in touch with them and let them know this is what the attorney's about tonight. Now, as for you, if you'd like to join our conversation, easy to do so. That information at the bottom of your screen. Also, Hollis Wright makes available attorneys, actual attorneys who are standing by ready to speak with you tonight during the show. It's a free, all fair, and confidential conversation, and it is yours for the taking. Now, leading our conversation, he is the managing partner of Hollis Wright. Josh Wright, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, too. Hope you're doing well.
I am, and you?
Doing well, and I'm glad we're doing this show. You know, there's a recent statistic that almost 1,000 people are killed in bicycle-related accidents. And there's a lot of litigation that comes out of those types of cases. And then there are a lot of people that are injured in cyclist accidents where litigation ensues. We're going to be talking about those things today and talking a little bit about the rules of the road. And we're so lucky because Danny Feldman, who's with us from Lewis and Feldman, he's been a contributor to the show several times to talk about this specific issue. And in fact, wrote a handbook we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. But we're super excited to have you on to be able to kind of walk us through the rules of the road and how litigation is handled in these type areas.
It's great to be here, Josh.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into this practice area and a little bit about your firm. And
Sure.
Then I want to talk a little bit about this handbook that you wrote because I think it's really helpful.
Sure. I got into cycling really because I have lousy knees. I've been an athlete, but over the years, my knees got banged up, had surgeries, and so cycling is a good sport where you can get a lot of exercise in, but not a lot of pounding on your joints. So that's how I got into cycling, and how I got into representing injured cyclists is I had a couple of very good friends who were cycling on Lakeshore, and they were hit by a drunk driver, very, very seriously injured. And that was about 20 years ago. But it combined my passion or hobby, cycling, with my law practice of representing injured folks.
Well, we're super happy to have you here to talk about it today. You brought a copy of what's called a legal handbook for Alabama cyclists. Tell me a little bit about this and how this was created and what the purpose of this is.
Sure. I'm a member of a national organization called Bike Law, and it's lawyers from about 25 of the 50 states that specialize in representing injured cyclists. And one of the things that we try to do is educate people on what the laws are as they pertain to cyclists. So I put that book together with my son, who's also a lawyer, who he did most of the research and work for me. But we put it together, and it just gives you the rules of the road as pertains to cyclists in simple, easy to understand language.
Well, this is really helpful, and I'm assuming if someone that's watching tonight wants a copy of this, we can get them a copy?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk a little bit about just the what you title the first chapter here is the right to the road. What are the rules that are unique and different for a cyclist compared to, when we typically drive a vehicle on the road?
Sure. Cyclists, for the most part, are subject to the same rules as motorists. A cyclist is considered to be traffic, and that's why, for instance, the bicyclist will be riding with traffic, not against traffic. So a cyclist has the same rights and the same duties and obligations. You got to stop for stoplights. You got to stop for stop signs. There are a few differences. There's not a lot, but there's a few. One is a cyclist is to ride as far to the right as practicable, and that's an important word. It's not possible, it's practicable. And of course, the reason is that cars can get by, but if you're going to make a left-hand turn, it's not practical to make a left-hand turn from all the way to the right. That's why you would move left, take the lane, indicate, and make your left-hand turn. But for the most part, cyclists have the same rights, same duties, same obligations as motorists.
What do you see most often in the litigation that you look at? Is it visibility-related issues? Is it drivers being aggressive and not allowing a cyclist to have their side of the lane? I mean, what do you see most?
Well, there's some of both. Distracted driving is huge. I mean, that's one where people are on the phone, they're texting, and of course, a cyclist doesn't take up as much room as a motorist or a truck. So distracted driving is a huge one. I think another one is the speed at which bicycles can go. You know, people think when you're riding a bicycle, you're going 5 or 10 miles an hour, and you may be up a steep hill. Yeah. But coming down a hill, you can be going 30, 35, 40 miles an hour. And so what you often have are collisions where, for example, a bicyclist is going and someone wants to pass and make a right-hand turn. And they don't realize just how fast that cyclist is going. And so when they make that turn in front of them, it's called basically a right hook. But that causes a wreck. The same situation when a bicycle is going one direction, a motorist going the other direction, motorist wants to make a left-hand turn in front of them, and they don't realize the speed of the cyclist. So I think the cyclist speed is another factor in these wrecks.
Yeah, you've got to have someone who understands this area of the law handle this, and that's why we bring Danny on, to be able to, if someone runs across this, or someone knows down the road that they need a lawyer in this area, all they got to do is contact us, and we're going to get you to Danny.
Question we've got here: must bicyclists wear a helmet when riding in the state of Alabama? Is that a law?
It is if you're 16 and under.
Okay.
There's a state law that says if you're 16 and under, you have to wear a helmet. Of course, most cyclists think it's a good idea to wear a helmet because it protects your brain and your head. And so most cyclists are going to wear a helmet. Some municipalities, and Homewood is one, some municipalities require a bicycle helmet for any age. And so if you're in Homewood, they have that law. But generally speaking, if you're over 16 and you're adult, it's not legally required, even though it's probably the smart thing to do.
I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I do want to talk a little bit about Alabama's 3-foot rule that Danny can kind of educate us on. And I also want to talk a little bit about whether or not you can tap into your own insurance if you've been involved in a bicycle accident.
All right, we are stepping aside our first break of the evening. As we do so, I want to remind you, Hollis Wright active on social media. Wherever you are on social media, Hollis Wright is there as well. Just search for them and you'll find them a great informational, educational follow there on all your favorite social media platforms. Stay tuned. We've got more of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
We love helping people. I think everyone at this firm feels the exact same way, that the reason we do what we do is to help people. And this show gives us the biggest platform possible to help as many people as we can in the community.
Welcome back in to the attorneys, talking about bicycle safety, bicycle accidents, all about that tonight. Would love to have you be a part of the conversation. And a reminder, Hollis, Wright, making attorneys available all throughout the show tonight. 844 Law Talk, the number you always need to keep in mind, 844 Law Talk. Josh?
All right, so Danny, when we went to break, I wanted to talk a little bit about Alabama's 3-foot passing law and how that applies. Let's first cover that, and then I want to talk a little bit about uninsured motorist coverage and its implications in biking litigation. But let's talk first about the 3-foot passing. That's a fairly new issue, isn't it?
Well, it's a fairly new law for Alabama.
Okay.
The neighboring states, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, even Mississippi, have had it for quite some time. Alabama got it in 2015. Basically what it says is when you pass a cyclist, you have to give at least 3 feet. It applies to roads that have a speed limit of 45 or less. So there's some issue as to whether or not it applies to speeds above that. Of course, I would argue that if 3 foot is the minimal safe distance for roads under 45, you got to give more over 45. That issue hasn't been litigated, but that seems reasonable to me. So that law's been in effect. You got to give 3 feet when you pass a cyclist.
And, you know, when you think about it, passing a cyclist also, you're required to do that only when it's safe for you to do so.
Correct.
For example, I've seen circumstances where someone is trying to pass a cyclist, they impede into the lane, you know, that's opposite to them, they cause an accident, and then they want to blame the cyclist. The reality is you can only pass a cyclist when it's safe to do so.
Absolutely. It's just like passing any other vehicle.
Yeah.
You need to make sure it's safe to do so. So you wouldn't want to pass a cyclist if you're going around a blind curve or a blind hill. That's exactly right.
What do you say, what's your advice for the motorists, since you're a cyclist yourself? What's your advice for the motorists related to just kind of patience in dealing with cyclists? I mean, people out trying to get exercise, right. They love, you know, these are passionate people, by the way. I mean, cyclists they're all in. I've always seen that. And what's your advice for people just trying to navigate around cyclists generally?
You know, and I get this question a lot. And can you be delayed trying to pass cyclists? There's no question. You may get delayed a couple of seconds. You may get delayed even a minute. But it's the price that you pay for living in a civilized society. In other words, you know, it's an inconvenience to stop at a stop sign or to stop at a red light when you're driving. I mean, you'd rather just go straight through, but we do that so there's not mayhem on the roads and chaos. And it's the same with passing a cyclist. If you get delayed a few seconds, sometimes it means that the cyclist catches you at the light, and so the only thing is that you sat at the light a few more seconds. Yeah. It just is crazy to take someone's life, to risk someone's life, whether it be the cyclist or your own or another motorist, because you can't wait a couple of seconds. So patience.
Hey, one more question I wanted to ask you about. Can you tap into your own automobile insurance under certain circumstances when you're operating a cycle?
Yeah, Josh, that's a great question. And we see this sometimes. A cyclist is out on the road, he's hit, and the car leaves. We call that a phantom vehicle because you don't know who it is. But even in that situation, your own automobile insurance coverage applies. It's called uninsured motorist or underinsured motorist. And so you have a duty, first of all, to put your carrier on notice, which is counterintuitive because you weren't in the car. But it will absolutely apply, and it would step into the shoes of that phantom vehicle or that uninsured vehicle if you know who it is, but they just don't have insurance.
See, that's good information. A lot of people wouldn't even know that you could tap into that, given the fact that you're operating a motorcycle, but you've got to make sure you protect yourself, and getting to counsel early is going to be important to do.
Somebody who knows knows what they're doing. Let me ask you about hand signals. What are the rules there,
Sure.
and is any of that required?
Well, yes, the code says you're supposed to give a hand signal, and I'm drawing a blank if the code is silent as to left or right, but it's for one of them, the hand signal is what you would expect, your hands out and extended. And of course, to make a right turn, it'd be the right hand. To make a left turn, it'd be a left hand. And you want to do that because as a cyclist, you want to be predictable to motorists. Right. You want to indicate and let a motorist know what you're going to do, and that's the best way to do it. So the code requires it, and it's the smart thing to do.
Talk a little bit about municipalities and how I've noticed, definitely in the last 10 to 15 years, bike lanes have become really, really prominent in certain communities that I travel to, and even in Alabama. What role does a municipality play in kind of creating those lanes?
Well, a big role. I mean, and certain municipalities have been very aggressive in doing so. And for instance, Birmingham has not created bike lanes per se, but they have these shards which have the bicyclist logo on various roads. Fifth Avenue South is one, First Avenue South is another. And it's to let cars know that there's a bunch of cyclists here. So that's been important. And then there are other municipalities that have created lanes which are designated areas, usually separated by white paint, to indicate that that's where a cyclist should be.
E-bikes have become super popular, and you can kind of explain in general what that is, but we see a lot of them downtown now. Do the rules generally apply to e-bikes the way that they would for a regular cyclist?
They do, and there is national e-bike legislation that Alabama has not yet adopted. There's two classes of e-bikes, one that go up to 20 miles per hour, one that go up to 28 miles per hour, and there's slightly different rules for each, but generally speaking, the same rules that apply to bicycles apply to e-bikes. And e-bikes, they are terrific because it expands the opportunity for people to bike, because you have that assist, that electrical assist, and so it's a lot easier pedaling up a hill on an e-bike than on a regular traditional bike.
You would be an e-bike cyclist.
I look like an e-bike.
If there was going to be, if you were going to cycle, that would be what it would be.
You're the regular cyclist. I'm definitely the e-bike. What are the requirements when it comes to lighting on bikes?
Yeah. The code says that you have to have at nighttime, and nighttime is an undefined word in the code, but when it's dark, right? You have to have a front headlight that you can see, it says from 100 to 600 feet, and that has to be white. And the code says a red reflector that is visible when a light shines upon it from 100 to 500 feet. Most people will have a reflector or what's called a blinky, or an actual light, so that you can see it regardless of whether or not light shines on it. As I've ridden more and more, you'll find more cyclists that will have these lights on in the daylight as well, just to try to be seen. And I, for one, try very hard to do that. So although the law doesn't require it, many cyclists will have a front headlight going during the day, as well as a red blinky or a blue blinky on the back. And again, it's just so that you want to be seen, so a motorist knows you're there.
Hey, and I know we're getting ready to go to break, but before we do, let me just ask you this. Early in the morning, before dawn, there are a lot of people jogging, cyclists on the road. Are there special rules at that time where a cyclist has to wear certain protective gear, reflective gear, that kind of thing, or does the law just kind of dictate, you've got to be able to be noticed regardless of what time it is during the day?
Yeah, it's the latter.
Okay, gotcha.
And most cyclists, and I do my riding a lot, 5 in the morning, so it's dark. We'll have the reflective gear, we'll have the headlights, we'll have the taillights, so you want to be seen.
When we come back, we're going to talk about certain other rules that bicyclists would have, for example, riding on sidewalks and the impact that can have, and kind of what Danny sees most commonly in his litigation and how he really evaluates these cases on the front end.
All right. Well, we are stepping aside right there. As we do so, reminders, we head to break. Make sure that you follow Hollis Wright all over social media. Also, if you want to take advantage of the opportunity to speak with an attorney standing by, just a few minutes remaining for you to do so. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm, recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, Choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? First, do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Learn about the cases they handle and the results they get. Second, find out what clients are saying about the firm. Many websites provide client testimonials or have a star ranking system. Use those to your advantage. And finally, talk with a lawyer from their office and ask them questions. Questions about the volume of cases they handle. Do they return phone calls? Are you just a number or a client that gets the attention you deserve? Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys right here on WBTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Just about 6 minutes remaining in the program. So if you want to be involved in the conversation before we wrap up tonight, you need to jump on that. Those attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by for about 6 more minutes if you want to get in touch with them. Josh?
So when we went to break, I wanted to ask you related to sidewalk use versus road use. Are cyclists allowed to use a sidewalk if there's not a dedicated area for them to ride, or do they have to use the road just like a vehicle would? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tough question. Certainly one can make the argument that bicycles are to be treated just like cars. Cars aren't supposed to be on the sidewalk, therefore cyclists should not be on the sidewalk. And some jurisdictions, some municipalities have laws that state that say you cannot be on the sidewalk riding a bicycle, which is contrary to what most people think. Other municipalities don't have any laws addressing it, and some municipalities have laws saying it is okay to be on the sidewalk in these certain areas. So it really depends on where you are.
Gotcha. What is unique about how you evaluate a case coming in compared to a typical car accident case that you and I would handle? What's unique about these? How do you handle these differently from the outset, if at all, than a traditional accident?
Well, there are a couple of things. One thing, and this is becoming more and more true, and maybe it's true with regular auto wrecks as well, but a lot of cyclists have devices, Strava, Garmin, that record their ride. So if they have that kind of device, it shows you their exact speed, their exact location, and all of that. So you have access to that information that you may not have in a regular just automobile case. So that's one thing. Another kind of unique aspect of it has to do with the property damage claim, because people may be surprised to know that bicycles can cost $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, and so you're having to educate adjusters on the cost of these bicycles. And you know, most bicyclists want to get their bicycle back and their property done sooner rather than later. So that's a pretty big focus initially in the claim.
What do you see most? Like what is is there a common denominator, maybe the wrong term, but kind of a common denominator of the types of events you see? I mean, is it a visibility issue? Is it a lighting issue? Is it a impatient driver? All of the above? I don't know. I'd just be interested to know.
There's always two defenses that motorists have, and they're part of the same thing. Number one is I never saw him, and number two is he swerved right in front of me. And of course, that means because he didn't see him. Yeah. So usually it's a visibility issue caused oftentimes by distraction, other times because they're DUI or something like that. We do see occasionally cases where it's an aggressive motorist. Cyclists will be familiar with the term buzzing, and that is when a motorist will go by you very close, lay on the horn, and it's really scary when you're on a bicycle. And occasionally the motorist makes a mistake. I mean, they make a mistake when they do it to begin with, but then they hit the cyclist. And so you have some of those. Most of the time, though, I think it's just straight up not paying attention, not to their driving, and bicyclists being a little bit harder to see than cars.
Yeah, and these injuries can be catastrophic
They can,
too.
yeah. I'm curious as to, especially since you're such a passionate cyclist yourself, are Alabama and specifically our area, are we becoming much more bike friendly?
More people are cycling. I really think that, and I think that this pandemic has been a boon to cycling, not only the shops, but when you see a cyclist and you don't see them as just some irritation or something that slows you down, but you see them as, that could be your brother, your father, your mother, your daughter, your son, or your friend, you tend to be more patient with them. And so I think the more people that cycle, the friendlier our community would be to cyclists. And I see that happening.
I know we'll get this question, so I'm going to ask it. Can you get a DUI on a motor or on a cycle?
Yes.
Okay. So that's I know we'll get that question.
I'm sure.
And we will get that question tonight.
So that happens,
I wanted to answer that right there.
Yes, it's interesting because you can get a DUI, and you should be able to if you're cycling drunk, but you're not required to have your license with you when you bicycle.
Okay.
And so sometimes people ask about that.
Yeah.
The code does not require you to have a license with you.
We have about a minute and a half remaining. Just time enough for a final thought from the both of you. And if you would, you go first, please.
I always like to talk about cycling and the laws as pertain to it. It's great to be given this forum, and so I thank you guys for it. And it's great to see more people cycling even during these strange times.
Well, and I called you a contributor at the beginning. You've been on the show 3 times because this is a show that gets a lot of feedback, and because there are a lot of people that are doing this. We still have about a minute. I did want to ask one final question. Sometimes early in the morning, I will see an entire group of bikers, folks that are cycling that we're talking about like 50, 100 people. How do you manage that as a motorist? Because I know that's got to be kind of an issue.
It's tough. It's tough. And there are some big groups that ride together. The law says cyclists can ride 2 abreast.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, and I've ridden with groups, but if you had 30 people, say, and you had a single file line of 30 people, that's awfully tough to pass. If you have them condensed, so it's 15, 2 abreast, it's actually a little bit easier to pass. Yeah. And so.
Well, that's good. That's good. And I just wanted to hit that.
That's good.
And first of all, if you've got an accident, you want to talk to Danny.
No
for
doubt
sure,
about it.
related to this. Thank you for being on.
Thank both of you. Appreciate the time. Some really helpful stuff tonight. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We're grateful, as always, for you joining us and meeting us here every Sunday night. And we'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.